Hello, this is Mensaflow again here, and we're going to go into a little tutorial about the back office system that controls the Mensaflow architecture. There's another video on that if you look on our YouTube channel for that. We're going to go into what's all involved in the back office to managing this server, the Mensaflow server here. So the first thing up here we'd look at is just in the upper right hand corner. There's a place where you can see where they can support. Just you can email us if you have issues. You can sign out to get into a different account. But let's take a look at the account, and basically you can change the password and change your language, and so the languages supported are English, Spanish, and French. You can then update the account accordingly. We're going to stay in English here because this video is in English, and so this is a place you can change your icon here for the use in the back office system if you desire. So in this, we basically can see this is kind of the home page here, the little house here, and it shows you that you can either add a new workspace, or here's some existing workspaces that we have here. And we just know that each of these workspaces are independent. They don't know about each other. Of course, you could use N8N workflows to communicate to between these. However, you must have an enterprise server to be able to own the entire server here. If you have a standard account or a pro account, then you will only see the individual workspaces and cannot add. So in order to be able to add new workspaces, either you need to purchase a standard pro or be an enterprise server where you own the whole thing, and then you can do what you want, basically. So the first thing up here we will want to see is that you have this up arrow here, which is, we've already explained, this is the document manager, and each of these workspaces has specific configurations that you can do. Of course, this is complete configurations in terms of these are somewhat limited in other user rights, like the workspace manager has a different set. We'll see that in a moment here. The general settings, the chat settings, and the vector database, different members that you have as part of this group. And here we have two sub users, e.g. support and agent configurations, which is to be managed, and you can manage these users accordingly at this level. So that's the kind of the scope there of that. And of course, we saw before that this was the document manager, which was described in an earlier video. Different threads. Here's the default thread, and basically you have a chat space here. This is an administrator chat space designed for the administrator to look at their LLM and their basically infrastructure. We'll go into more of this in detail in another video. Looking at specific settings that you can do here, taking a look at this, here's the different settings you can do in terms of the server-wide configurations. First is what we call the default LLM provider, and there's different potential LLM providers here, and these are settable on a workspace basis, but this is, you can set the default. You can set the vector database default. You have native LanceDB or Pinecone. You can set that up. Pinecone is a paid service with an API. The LanceDB is locally hosted in the Mensaflow server. The embedder, we use a local Llama-based embedder. There's different embedding models. We think this is probably the best one here, and there's a whole kind of a method to the madness here in terms of the embedding chunk size. We'll have another video on this, how the embedder works. It's quite critical to make sure that that works good. And of course, that's combined with the text chunk size. It's all about the embedding into the vectorial database. Speech providers, we use the native providers here that's locally hosted. Transcription services, administration of users, these are different users in the system. Here you can look at the different workspace chats. Of course, as an administrator, you can see everybody's. It's restricted on a workspace basis. Here's just kind of a system preferences in terms of limitation of messages per day. You have agent skills, and then there's some customization. You can put different things in here in terms of how you want the application to look. Tools, these are the chat embeds for the different workspaces. These are where you identify chat embed codes for a particular workspace. Then the developer API keys. These are the API keys on a workspace basis. As well as, people have their chats. Of course, this is a server-wide. You can check out the different workspaces, and you can see the different chat spaces and their chats. And historically, and these are accessible through APIs to give you an idea of what they look like. Each chat has a session ID, and so some options there. You can put some notes on there, so you can actually see the chats in the back end of the different chatters that went into the chat box, which can be quite useful. And then we have what we call insertion configuration in the chat box. If you want to have some special insertion messages put into the chat space, this is based on workspace. You can have a start message, you can have an insertion message after so many messages. Here it says, "Are you ready to engage with Mensaflow?" That'll appear 3 chats after the start. These are different error messages that will occur when you have a network saturation or a prompt limit. I think in the case of a standard, there's only so many prompts you can do before it stalls. And this is to limit the server load. And of course, based upon the account size, this is what you may have. Going further, there's different ways to access information. We won't go into this. We'll go into this at a later date. Accounts, jobs, these are different things for prompt accelerators. And these prompt accelerators, are in the forms. You see that these are different forms that you can have. They're editable, and we'll go into much more detail of what this means. It's quite more in-depth considerations for the server. Next, we have workspace configuration. These are the specific workspace configurations if you want to continue to edit this. And again, this is at a server level. Some knowledge of the system is required to change these. You can change the email default. There's a kind of a summary email message that goes out late at night. Then we have finally we have some experimental feature. We won't go into that because those are things that we were working on. And then the logs. This allows you to look at all the logs on the different. It goes obviously can get quite large. There are different things going on. If you have errors, you can search by error or specific log messages, so you can get an idea what's going on in the server in the back for troubleshooting, etc., etc. Next, we're going to log out here and log in as a workspace user. We'll log in as Mensaflow. So here we're logged in as Mensaflow, and we're logged in as a workspace manager. And you cannot add a new workspace. You can only work within the workspace that you've been assigned to. The same kind of theory with the document manager, and the settings for this workspace is somewhat more limited. It's limited to general settings, the chat settings. Again, we'll go into that in detail later, and the vectorial database settings. Again, you have your specific workspace administration chat that you can use. And then we have the different users. These are the different users here. We only have 1 user for this particular account. You can also look at the workspace chats, and again you have the embed chats, but here you only see it for Mensaflow. And if we continue on here, you have the insertion configuration as we described. Again, more stuff for the prompt accelerator jobs. We'll continue with this further, and then of course the form configurator, which is these forms that we talked about earlier that we're going to have a further video on how to do prompt accelerators. So with that, we can talk a little bit about user rights in Mensaflow. At first, we logged in as the server administrator. We saw all the workspaces you see here, and then each workspace are unique and they're independent. And these databases, in terms of their spaces, are independent and cannot talk without special workflow programmation. So each workspace, you can have multiple workspaces per server. Each workspace then will have what we call an individual staff user associated with that. We will log in and show you what the difference there means. So if you recall there, we had a user under the workspace manager of Ecologen. So now we're going to log in as EG Support, which is a staff member of Ecologen, which we'll see what that looks like. So we log in there, and you see the same thing as Ecologen. But as a staff member, you cannot access, as you can see here, you cannot access the settings. So the staff member of Ecologen cannot access the settings. Only the manager can access that for that particular workspace. And you can see that there's somewhat limited in what you can see. You can see the different users, you can see the workspace chats, and you can see the embedded chats here as well, but that's about it. So as a staff member, and it's pretty much read-only. But I think the real difference is, this is the document manager. So we have a file that we've uploaded here to the document directory. We cannot place it in any of these unless it's in the same name of the folder as the user himself. So we have to make a folder called the same EG support. So we'll create a folder there, and if you try to move it there, that is allowed, and you can see there that it's allowed to move it in there, and you can see the file, and then you can embed it accordingly to the brain, to the embedding process as we've described in earlier videos. So that means the EG support can only place files into the brain under the EG support area there. So that's quite important. You won't be able to move it. If you see here, you can't move it only to EGs, but you can't move it to you can move it back to the document directory, but you can't move it to any of these other directories. So that allows some responsibility for each staff member as they're supporting for a more larger organization that wants to put documents in a more organized manner by a particular staff member that are managing the brain. That way it allows you to do that. Some people don't need that, but some organizations are large enough to need that. So that's kind of a key feature in terms of user rights. So trying to keep these videos as short as possible. I know we went through that rather fast. Maybe you can replay the video. But the best way is to go in there and actually just try the system, and you can see what the different features are on a user basis in terms of its user rights. Again, subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like the video on the way out.